is all about design and art. And if you can get that, then no matter what field you're in, you'll use it all the time. And you'll use it for interior design, for architectural design, for just landscape photography, for painting, watercolors. So it's so much more than, this is not, I mean, as much as it's about photography and design, it's so much more about art, the idea of art. Now, a few things. First of all, I am not a professional. You guys all know that. This is not my number one job. So I am a dabbler. My mother actually is an artist. So it skipped a generation with me. It went from my mother to Carissa and to my kids. With me, I still draw stick figures. Is that not true, Elizabeth?
Very true.
Yes.
But you have an eye, Sam.
I might have an eye, but I don't have the skill. Like drawing, I cannot draw. I really cannot. And that's not even an exact, I'm the worst, probably out of all of you, I'm the worst. So, but what it is when you look at something, how do you see it in its composition and its in color, and do you understand some of the concepts that are why something looks good and why something doesn't look good? Another thing is there are rules, and there are rules that are made to be broken. You know how that is in life, right? So with art, that truly is the case. Like there are all these rules. We're going to learn a bunch of them, but then you're going to say, yeah, but I don't really like that. I don't like the way that looks. I think it looks better like this. And you might think that the other way looks better. So I think it's important to realize that the way we're going to talk about things is a lot of it is going to be, hello, Chip. A lot of it is understanding why certain things are the way they are, but then recognizing that sometimes you might want to jump out of that. So we're going to talk about photography. We're going to talk about graphic design. We're going to talk about website design. We're going to talk about how to utilize. Carissa is going to be the main person on, especially utilizing something called Figma. Figma is actually, anyone know what Figma is? Anyone ever heard of it? Oh, one other person. You have? Grace? Oh, no. Elise, do you use Figma?
I used it in UCLA.
Okay.
Is it an Adobe product?
No, it is not. It's actually free, and that's why it's great. It's actually open source free, and Carissa uses that more than Photoshop and more than Illustrator. So she's going to teach you that, and that what's great about that is it's free. You don't have to even own it. It's online. But I will go over Adobe Creative Suite because that is a key part of everything. And that includes Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe InDesign. Grace can do Illustrator.
Yeah, very little.
Well, you could teach that. But you don't need all these things, but it's more of to show you what can be done with everything. And you don't even need all these products. What you really need most is your eyes. You need to be able to see just what looks good. And again, a lot of you already have that. You have a good eye for art. You have a good eye for what looks good. In fact, what I would imagine is that after this time, a lot of you will soar and you'll take this to much further heights and depths than I've ever gone. So some of you might do that. So the application of all this goes way beyond, it goes way beyond just taking a picture. It's website design, graphic design. It could be utilizing it in cinematography. It could be as simple as making slideshows. You might make better slideshows, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of practical implications and uses for all these things and utilizations. Another thing is, please feel free anytime to interrupt me. If you do not understand something, don't just say, yes, I understand, but don't understand. Yes, Grace.
So, how do you if you don't have an eye, how do you get an eye? So like for me, I feel like I have an eye for certain things like in design, like for instance, like, like a print or, something that I use for work. But then I don't feel like I have an eye when it comes to photography or interior design. So I feel like it really depends. So how do you, I feel like you either have it or you don't. And I noticed that even with, people who are great designers and they know how to, they're very skilled at it in terms of drawing and everything, but then they don't have an eye.
Mhm, mhm,
I mean, great designers. And
mhm.
so how do you get the eye? How do you get an eye?
We'll talk a lot about it next time because on next time we'll talk primarily about design. But I would say this, what we'll say this again then, but I'll say it now, is that the way you get an eye is you have to look at a lot of good work. I mean, that's primarily, and there are a lot of resources and websites to go to where you can just look at different logos, different I don't know, like um, products and pictures and product design. So there are a lot of places you can go. But one is, it's just like anything, you have to train your eye. And the way you train your eye is you have to look at a lot of things.
Mm.
You also have to be very observant because design is everywhere. It's not just on a graphic design website. It's on, it's street signs, it's billboards, it's websites, it's the way that a camera is developed, is a design. So design is everywhere, people's homes. What is it that makes one home look really chic and the other one look dilapidated? It's not just that it looks that way. There are certain elements about it that make you realize, oh, that's why it's off. But again, here's one thing. I mean, there's so many principles. One is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That really is the case many times. What one person deems as beautiful, another person will deem as it's not so nice looking. And so there's going to be exceptions, generalizations. If you go to an art museum, you'll see what I mean. You go and some people say this is beautiful, and some will say this is terrible. So a lot of design is so much about trying to get an idea and to be able to frame it well and to be able to convey a message. And so how you do that is going to be a lot of going, researching, looking, and then critiquing and receiving critique. That's another thing. It's hard to receive critique when you've worked on something. But if you're not willing to do that, you won't grow. That's like anything, right? So we will talk a lot about design next time we meet. But today, we are all here to first learn about the basics of photography. Like I said, I'm not a professional. I don't know every single detail about and photography. And so I want you to know that what you're going to be learning is the best of my own personal ability. So please take all this with a grain of salt. And secondly is that if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to jump in anytime and you're welcome to do so. Okay? So with that said, I'm going to share a screen. And with that, I will, do you all see the screen? Photography and design? Okay. So we're going to start here. I almost, there's so much a part of me that's like, okay, let's pray together. As we talk about photography. Yes, Lord, let's bless this time. Okay, so first, whoops. Why is it not moving? Why is my screen not, hold on, sorry. Oh, whoops. You guys see that? Whoa, that jumped. Okay. The basics. First is light. Photography is the sort of the capture of light. And light is essential. It's you'd be surprised how much light impacts your shot and you just never realized it. Or maybe you did realize it, but you just didn't realize how much it impacts it. So a lot of pictures that are poorly done are based on not understanding where the light source is. And there's many ways to view it. For example, if you look at this, there's Some of these pictures I took, some of these pictures are just randomly off the web. All these pictures have to do with light. Some of them have a really poor use of light, and some of them have an excellent use of light. For example, the top left corner, the streaming, this one right here is, we'll talk about this. This is about a slow shutter speed. And there's probably some sort of movement of maybe a train or something that has passed by, and it's left a light residue. And so it's capturing that. The wedding shot of the bridesmaids, that's a terrible shot. You know, it's called overexposure. Basically, they have taken a shot and they did it in too bright of light, and they've cranked up their exposure too much. The right shot is a completely slow open shutter. We'll talk about all these terms. Just ignore what I'm saying in terms of, you know, the words, but understand that it's a great shot. It's a lot of astronomy shots, star shots are based on an open shutter slow. So we'll talk about that. The bottom left, the furthest left, the one with the woman in that field, that shot, so many people make this mistake. Do you see that shot? That shot, what happens is that they take a shot with the sun in the background. And when you take a shot with the sun in the background, it underexposes the subject, the subject matter in the foreground. So whenever you're taking a shot, you always have to think about, where is the sun? Where is the light source? Is it behind the subject or is it in front of the subject? If it's behind the subject, you're always going to have this type of shot where the subject is completely dark. That's just a bad shot. This shot on the bottom where everything's gold, that shot is taken at a time called the golden hour. And the golden hour is sort of the photographer's dream shot. It's the shot that if you go to Yosemite, and a lot of people try to go and wait to close to sunset, and the sun has already dropped below the horizon, and then suddenly the sun reflection shoots off the clouds and then beams right onto Half Dome. So you get the Half Dome lit gold. That's called the golden hour. And whenever it's at that point where the sun has either dropped below the horizon or is completely below the horizon, the skies just light up and all the windows turn gold. This is a shot I took of Rob at the men's camping trip. And we didn't have any light. It was completely pitch black. I didn't process this, but it was just the one light as a, I think it was a flashlight. No, it was a lantern. And so the lantern is shining on the left side of his face, and the other side, there's nothing. So that's why you'll see those type of shots, you know, where there's a half dark, half light. And then this last one, I just wanted to show it to you because Carissa was doing her skills to share, or her GT class, and she was drawing the tiger. And if you see, I put my camera on a tripod, and then Jack, you can join us. You can bring up a chair. And then if you see on the corner, I put a softbox, a light. I mean, if you went to that spot, you would think, oh, there's plenty of light there. Why would you need to add additional light? Because if you are projecting something and broadcasting it, you actually want the subject to be as clear as possible. So for me, putting up extra artificial light helped that. Anyway, all of this to say that light is so significant. It's a big part of photography. It's so critical to know, where's your subject, where's the light coming from, which direction is your subject in. There's other things about light, the idea that the concept of soft light, harsh light, like for example, most photographers will not take a picture at noon because the sun is directly above your head. And so when it comes, it makes everything on a face really harsh. So Nina, I know you do this all the time. You're always taking those pictures of your kids under the awning at Iron Horse, right? or you're always trying to find places where there's a soft light, where because for photographers, some of the best times are usually either some place where the light is diffused or where the light is not as harsh, or it could be a cloudy day. And sometimes those are great, but that has its problems too. So anyway, all that to say is light is so essential. Any questions thus far about light? So I'm going to just give you the basics, because these basics, like I said, they apply to anything. If you're taking video, it matters. If you're taking photos, it matters. If you're using your phone, to take a picture, it actually matters where the light is. If you're using this, it matters. If you're taking video, so light is so critical. Okay? If you have, all right, let's go back. Next, oops, oh, sorry. The rule of thirds. I'm sure many of you have heard of this before, the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds is this concept. First of all, I do not know this person. He's just some random kid. But most people, when they take a picture, this is how they take a picture. They say, oh, let me take a picture of you. And they put the person square straight in the middle. And you're probably thinking, well, what's wrong with that? That seems totally fine. It is, maybe. I mean, it's nice, but if the goal is nice, I want to do okay, then you would do that. But if it's, I want my pictures to stand out, I want them to punch, then you probably don't want to take a picture with someone straight in the middle. That's just too obvious, something that you don't want to think about. Now, rule of thirds is you basically take your frame and you cut it into thirds. So you end up with 9 boxes. And this picture is not the rule of thirds. Now, it's not wrong. Again, so like I said, there are rules, and then there are rules that are made to be broken. So sometimes you want to stick with the rules, and sometimes you want to go outside the rules. So this picture, while it's okay, it just seems unbalanced. Unless you're trying to get specifically, I want a deeply unbalanced shot, because maybe on the right corner, there's something like, you see that little faded thing in the background. Maybe somehow you want that to stand out. So you're saying, I want both of them. So maybe there's a desire to do that. But if not, then there's something unbalanced about this picture. Next. It's not moving. Sorry. Oh, I don't know why it does this, but it doesn't respond so quickly. Okay, here we go. Go back to him. All right. Next is rule of thirds is not, oh, you put him at the bottom and just as long as he's somewhere around that area. Now that looks off. Looks like he's a headless guy. I mean, a bodiless guy. So essentially, the rule of thirds is getting the person on the frame, that 1/3 of the frame, on the intersections. And generally, when you do that, pictures do look better. I mean, here's a picture, here's a concept. So you have this dog, and then you have the horizon on the second shot. It just if I showed you what it looked like if they were in the middle, you'd see, well, it doesn't look as good as if it was on the rule of thirds. Now, again, there are times to break that rule, but generally you want to stick to that rule. It really works. It just makes pictures punch and stand out more. Just try that. Again, you don't need a DSLR to do this. Just use your phone, right? Oops. Next is perspective, shapes, and lines. Oh, someone's trying to come in. Who is this? Sorry, hold on. Let me just get this person in. Oh, it's Scott. Hello, Scott.
Hello.
I'm talking right now, so I'll share my screen. You can watch.
Thank you.
So next is perspective, shapes, and lines. Perspective, shapes, and lines are such a great part of photography. You know, they really, really make things stand out. The thing about photography is, and art in general, is wherever you are, you have to look around. And when you are actually trying to take pictures, you have to look everywhere. You have to look up, down, left, right, behind, in front. So a lot of the best pictures are in the sky, especially in a museum. Like you go to a museum and you think, oh, all the art's on the wall. But actually, sometimes it's on the ceiling. Sometimes it's on the floor. And also, this type of perspective isn't always found by just standing there and turning your head. Sometimes you have to get on your hands and knees and point your camera from the ground all the way up. So perspective, lines, shapes, they're all around us. The question is, do you see them? Are you looking for them? So bridges, doors, pathways, paths, they're just some of the best pictures, because when you look at that bridge, you'll see. Now, to get this shot, like what they probably have to do is, you know, the way you compose a shot like this, the bridge, is if it's possible that a little bit, if they had pulled the shot back a little bit further, there might have been maybe a red, I don't know, ribbon tied right there, and it would have messed the shot up if there was a red ribbon. Like, so you're always trying to like frame the shot so that everything you see in your frame is intentional. Like there's nothing in that shot that should be in that shot that you should say, I didn't really want that there. If you didn't really want it there, then you probably should have cropped it out, or you should have pulled back your shot or zoomed in more. So always remember that whatever shot you take, to be a better photographer is to be very intentional about your shooting. To think that what you see, you want, it's not what you see that you're trying to convey, it's what you want someone who's looking at it to see. Because if you were at that scene with the bridge, you might have seen a lot of other things. But what you're trying to do is get the person who's looking at that photo to say, wow, that bridge is awesome. But maybe if they were there, they wouldn't be looking at the bridge. They might be looking at that monkey that's on the left side of it, you know. And so that's the idea. Second is like the Eiffel Tower. If you ever gone to a landmark, most people take a landmark picture. Oh, all right, family, get over right there, and they stick them right in the middle. Then they take the picture, and the Eiffel Tower is right in the middle. Everyone looks at that picture and says, oh yeah, but that's not a picture. If you put it on the wall, it's nice, but it's like basically everyone's home video, you know. But if you wanted a picture that you said, I want something, and the reason I got into photography is, this is a long time ago, but Sue and I, we couldn't afford any art at all. We never could. And one day she went out and bought some pictures, and I said, how much did you pay for that? She said, I forgot what she said. And I said, I think I could take better pictures. And I had to learn how to do that though, because actually I went out and tried to do it and I couldn't. I actually couldn't. It turned out terrible. So you have to actually practice and learn and watch and think. And so if your goal is, I want to put some pictures on my wall that are just going to knock out people and think, wow, this is not just knock out people, but you're going to enjoy it, then taking a picture of the Eiffel Tower can be great, but go and get different perspectives. See the line, see the symmetry, and see how the light. So this picture is taken, if you look at it, it's sort of foggy on a foggy day, and the light is there. It has a different color, and it's definitely from the lower angle, and it's shooting up, right, straight up rather than way back center. The spiral case, talk about, those are some great shots. Stairs, because they're all symmetrical. So if you ever get a chance to see different stairs, or this one's I think it's like a subway station, you know, empty subway station, black and white. And some of the best shots do look like this, you know, where it's just pretty basic and simple. What's really cool about this, he could have taken it with I don't know if you like it better. I like it better with the guy there. Some might not like it, but I sort of like the idea of, it gives you perspective of, oh, this guy's standing here. There's a sense of etherealness to it. But someone might just like the openness of it. So that's where, again, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Any questions? Okay, we're gonna keep on going. I don't know why it does this. It sort of freezes on me. Okay, depth of field. Depth of field is something that most cameras, phone cameras, have been working on. Apple, Samsung, most of the Android cameras have been for a while, because when phone cameras first came out, they had zero depth of field. Depth of field is this. It's when you take a shot, there's a point that you take the shot of. And when there's a narrow depth of field, what happens is the subject is, they're the focal point, and then everything beyond a certain point becomes blurred, because the depth of field is very narrow. It's only focusing on the subject itself. We'll talk about why that happens, because that'll be a significant part of your camera. Large depth of field is where everything is in focus. A large depth of field is usually Yosemite. You want to take a huge picture and you want everything to be in focus. Narrow depth of field is usually with a subject, where you're taking a portrait of somebody and you want the background blurred. And so if you have an iPhone these days, they do that, or Samsung, they do that with the portrait mode or something. What it's doing is essentially narrowing the depth of field, and they do that all digitally. They do that mathematically and digitally. But if you have a DSLR, you can actually do that. And actually, one of the great things about Android phones versus iPhone is that Android, you can actually have a lot more control over your phone than iPhones do. They actually have a way you can control all the different aspects of it. So I used to have an Android phone. That was one of the best parts of it. Now with iPhone, you can't do that. So for those of you who like that concept of depth of field, you really will appreciate this. Okay, intentional framing. I talked about that, meaning you have to be very focused on what you want in your picture. Like this picture on the left and right, you can see there's a big difference. First of all, the person who's taking the picture on the left of the girl, that photographer didn't care about where the light source was. So there's a little bit of sun that's peeking out on the eye, and the rest of the face is shaded. That just didn't look that good, actually. And I would say most people take pictures like that. They're not thinking about light at all. They only think about, oh, let me just get into that picture, and then boom, take the shot, and you see their face is all splotchy with some light, some shaded, some light, some shaded, versus the picture on the right, you can see completely her face is even toned, right? The light source is the same. There's no difference in lighting. It's straight, and it's very clear. It's not overexposed, and it's not underexposed. The other side, there's definitely an overexposure on her eye and an underexposure. It's dark on the rest of her face. So none of it is actually exposed correctly. None of it is spot on where you can see detail and you get a sense of her. So the other one is where you're taking a shot of two different things. And this is something that a lot of people will do. Taking a shot of a waterfall and taking a shot of a person. First of all, the person is just sort of randomly walking, right? And everyone has these shots. Even if you try to get good shots, sometimes people walk away and stuff. So that's one thing. But you'll notice this is not a great shot. You'd rather either have the waterfall or her, but you want to figure out what's your main subject. If it is both of them, there should be a reason why it's both. The dog picture, you're probably thinking, well, what's wrong with that picture? It's two separate items. So again, these pictures, it's not that they're terrible. It's that you're not going to really do anything with them. They'll probably sit on your computer and you'll never look at it again because it just doesn't stand out, right? So you want pictures that say, wow, this is a really great shot. And I enjoy looking at this. That picture, if you have two different subjects again, and they're just sort of randomly together, then there's no composition, no idea what the purpose of that is. So this other one is a negative space one, where you have this person over in the corner, and then you have this big blank spot on the left side, but it has no purpose again. This bottom picture is very, very typical of most pictures. Their feet are chopped off. You know, they always say a lot of photographers, amateur photographers, they love amputating people. Everyone loses arms and legs with amateur photographers. And really, you don't have to do that, but it's just because they didn't stop and actually think about their shot. So keeping in mind, now I made this mistake on one of my shots that I'll show you later. So it happens, and it'll happen even though you know you're not supposed to do it, it still happens. Color. Color is a key part. You all know that because I'm sure a lot of you use filters for Instagram or stuff like that, and you're always colorizing things. Well, just to let you know, color, you'll often see something called white balance. White balance is basically the manipulation of color temperature. And the reason why, if you ever look on your camera and you'll see it'll say 2000K, 3000K, it'll give a K, and that stands for Kelvin. And the Kelvin, it's measuring the temperature, literally like the temperature of hot to cold. Sorry for those of you who don't, ignore the Kelvin part if you don't even understand it, it's okay. But know this is that when you look at a scene, there's all different types of colors from cool, which is more bluish, to warm, which is more yellow. And the manipulation of that can really make a huge difference in a picture. It matters a lot. Sorry, just trying to, any questions?
Is the color manipulation something during picture taking or post?
It is usually, you can do it during and you can do it post.
Okay.
So
Just a source of light you're talking about?
no, it's, for example, on a camera, it will give you, it depends on your camera. Some cameras will give you an option to be able to control the white balance. But I would say this is that most people really don't understand how to control the white balance on their camera. So because of that, what's great is that you can actually control it after you take the picture.
Oh.
Now, most of you will probably control the white balance utilizing very basic functions. Like if you go to, there's a lot of great open source software out there that lets you control the white balance. But I think even Adobe Preview does that. I don't know, even like Adobe Preview might.
Okay.
So you can do it, I would say generally do it post. And the way you do it post processing
Yeah.
is, what was that?
Oh, sorry, that's Matthew.
Oh, okay. Sorry, just gonna, we'll talk about color later too. Equipment. So, whoa, right? This thing's like, here we go. Equipment. So like I said, there are DSLRs, which is on the top left. There are many lenses. What you're looking at on the top right are Canon lenses. Whenever you see those red lines on the white lenses, that's Canon. Nikon has the same, Sony, Panasonic, which is actually Lumix. And then on the bottom are soft boxes, a tripod, umbrellas, your phone. And the list is endless. Actually, I could have posted so many. I want to show you. So, like I said, you have a DSLR, right? So this DSLR is basically, I need to look at one thing. It stands for digital single lens reflex, DSLR. And it used to be called SLR before it was digital. And it basically means it uses the same lens for framing, focusing, taking the photograph. And there's other different types of cameras. So reflex refers to the utilization of mirrors. And here's the thing. This is my second DSLR. The first one I had was a Canon, and it used to be, Amy, can I see your camera? Now look at Amy's camera. Now, how heavy is it, Amy? Can you unmute yourself?
Probably like 5 pounds.
Yeah, mine weighs probably about 1.5.
Wow.
So, and if you look, it's actually much smaller. So the reason why I used to have Amy's camera with almost the same lens, and I loved it, but then after a while, I stopped taking it with me everywhere because it was so heavy and it required a big bag. And so I just stopped taking it.
That's on all of this.
Yes. Yes. And so if I went somewhere, I just was like, I don't want to take that gigantic thing. My back was killing me every time I would take it. So that camera is what's called a full sensor digital DSLR. Let me see yours, Nina. Is that a Micro Four Thirds? What brand is that? Is that a Nikon? Can you unmute yourself?
This is a Sony
Okay.
6000. It's
Yes.
so it's really light.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
you could switch the lens, but it's
Yes.
super light.
I'm not sure if that. So Nina has a Sony 6000. I have a Sony A6400. And basically what it is, it's called, so Amy's camera actually has a mirror inside. So when it takes the shot, it actually takes the image coming in this way. It bounces off a mirror, and you'll hear when she takes a picture, it'll click, it'll go, that click is the mirror going up and down. So it actually goes up and down. Yes. So when you take a picture with that, you're going to hear a click. So Elise, you have the same thing in a Nikon, same camera, just a Nikon. So when you take a picture, it takes a click. The challenge with them, it's called a mirrored camera, DSLR. And the challenge with that is that, and I had one, it would often get dust in it. So that's the first thing. You have to clean your sensor. And sometimes with something like this, so you actually clean the dust off. There's something called a Nikon, this one's called the Nikon lens pen. And so on the one side, this is helpful. If you have a DSLR, I would recommend getting this pen, the Nikon lens pen. It's very cheap. On the one side is a little brush. See that? On the other side, it actually is like a little, you sort of clean the lens with it. And it actually helps to just clean your lens. You should also have like a microfiber cloth. And then this is like $5, but good way to get quick dust off your areas, right? Well, anyway, my camera, instead of having a mirror, it's called a mirrorless. It actually doesn't have a mirror. And it is not full frame, which is why it's not as big as Amy's camera nor as Elise's camera. It's called APC. It's a long, I don't have to explain, I don't want to explain it to you, but what happens is that it allows it to be smaller. It weighs about 1.5 pounds. I can take it pretty much everywhere. So I stick it into a small bag and then I can take that with me. So I don't have to be weighed down. It makes a big difference. And then I changed out all my lenses. So this one is an 18-135 zoom lens. This one is a 16 millimeter wide lens. And then this one is a 55-210. I'll explain all that, what that means. So dependent on what type of sensor size you have, whether you have a mirror or not, will shape how big your camera is. But technology is changing a lot, and it changes all the time. Anyone else have a DSLR? Anyone else?
Oh, Paige does.
Paige, you have a DSLR? If you have one, you want to keep it
My dad can't find it.
Oh, okay, okay. Anybody have any other questions? Okay. One thing I would strongly suggest, if there's one thing you want to get to purchase, and it's not even that expensive these days, is a good tripod. You could get a tripod. Elizabeth, underneath my bed is the phone adapter for the tripod. Get it on my side. So a tripod. So I used to have a really big, expensive tripod, but it weighed so much again, and you just never bring it anywhere. This one I got on Amazon. I think I paid like $50 or something. It does the job, and it's not that big, and I could take it anywhere. The reason why you want a tripod like this is it actually has something called a ball head. So what happens is that it's a ball, and because it's a ball, it has full ability to shift and shape. And so when I take a photo, I put on my, there's a plate. That plate goes onto the bottom of your camera. And then you just, and this, FYI, this is the camera that we use every Sunday to broadcast our worship. Because this A6400 has a video function, a 4K video function. So it actually does a good job. Yes, that's it. Reason why you want to get something like this is, first of all, like I said, you can put your SLR onto it and know that it's going to be secure. Oops. And then with it, with your ball head, because you can change it, you can change the direction of your camera and have it go in any direction. If I want to take a picture and I'm on top of Yosemite at Glacier Point and I want to get a shot looking down, I can just put it like this. The reason why you need it's not just, you might think a tripod is just so that you can actually take pictures of yourself, like a selfie. But that's actually not why. A lot of, you know those pictures where it showed the light streaking or the sky with the, it's impossible to take those shots without a tripod. The tripod, what happens is a lot of these shots, to have it as crisp, or if you're going to take a super slow shutter shot, you have to have the tripod so that your camera is not shaking at all, like zero. In fact, it has to be so still that a lot of photographers, what they will do, if you look, on the bottom of this is a hook. You see that hook? That hook is there because when I set up my tripod, I might put weights on here. I'll stick weights on it so that it is so steady that it won't shake at all. And the less that it shakes, especially if I'm trying to take a shot where I'm getting stars like streaking across the sky like that, it has to be completely still. And that's the only way you get it. So the more still, the better your shot, the clearer your shot, the crisper your shot. So the tripod has that. Another thing about, the cool thing about the tripod, this tripod, is that you can change out your ball head. And put on a phone adapter. Or I think this phone adapter is probably $5, $10, I don't know. And that way, you take this and just use your phone to take pictures. See that? And I've used that. So, whoops, a little bit too much. But I've taken this a lot, and I've actually used this a lot to take pictures. So this definitely, so you having a really light tripod is pretty cool because you can take it everywhere and it's pretty easy to take with you.
Pastor Sam,
Yes,
how heavy is that? How many pounds is that
I
tripod?
think it's like 3 pounds. Pretty light, right? Another thing, it's a detachable monopod, so it actually goes as a single, like this thing comes off. And what I can do is then attach my ball head to it, and then my my camera. With that is where you would take pictures. So if you want a shot of someone hitting a soccer ball, they're running, you can catch them right in the act. So, oh, I got it from Amazon. Yep. The phone adapter is Amazon, and you can really, there's so many. Just get the one that's recommended, the Amazon recommended one. They're really cheap. They're all over. The tripod, I'll send you what I have. There are a number of them that are very similar, and they're pretty similar. But I like mine, so I'll send you guys a link of that. Okay. Any other questions about equipment?
Yeah, I have another question.
Yes.
Okay, so I used to have the DLSR, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but they're old, and
Okay.
so John keeps saying like iPhone is better. So yeah, like he doesn't even like let me take that camera. I mean, it's 10 years. It is old. It's like 10 years old.
What
Then
is
he
it?
keeps saying that iPhone is better. So we don't need. I don't need to buy those expensive cameras that you have.
What camera is it?
Well, I used to have. I think it used to be Nikon. The one it was like Costco used to have it like
Okay.
10 years ago.
Yes. Yes. So, I'll put it to you this way. iPhone is better if you don't know how to use a DSLR. Everything I'm going to talk about moving forward is going to help you to understand why things work the way that they are. And it's true. Sometimes, honestly, the iPhone takes a better picture, especially this latest one, than a DSLR. So that's why this is not necessarily just about using a DSLR. However, there are certain things that DSLRs do that even right now an iPhone cannot do. And so, but if you don't know how to use a DSLR, then you're basically lugging around a really big, and actually if it's 10 years old, it's not even expensive anymore. It's just really big, that a lesser quality camera than your phone. However, the lenses themselves should be able to do something that the iPhone still cannot do. That is the case. So if you don't actually know how to use your camera, then yeah, it's true. A phone is better than your camera. A lot of people went out to buy these DSLRs. They go out, and if you look, do you all see that that green box on the dial? You see that green box on the dial? You might not be able to see what it says, but you see the green box, right? That's called auto. And every DSLR had that. And what happened is that a lot of people would go buy this thing, spend $1,000 or something, and they would put it on that green box and take pictures like that. That basically is no different than going out and buying a regular small point and shoot. It's essentially the same thing with a bigger lens. That's about it. That's the only difference. So if you don't know how to use any of these other things, then actually having a DSLR is pretty much worthless. Which is why we'll talk about what that is. So to answer your question, Eileen, yeah, there is value to a DSLR, definitely, but you just have to know how to use it. Any other questions? Okay. Let's go to this part. We'll talk a lot
Sorry,
more.
I have a question. Sorry,
Yes.
Sam. So I know you said that sometimes iPhones cell phones cannot do what a DSLR does. but for the most part, for like, you know, commercial or photography, when you're doing like videos, like a quick video for your social media, or like, you know, a video for your web, or like a, you know, sorry, an image for your website, do you feel like an iPhone 11 or something higher is sufficient for you know, for even commercial things, like not so much like catalog shots and lifestyle, you know,
Mhm.
like product photography, but for like everyday, like things that you need to put up quickly for the web?
I think the phone can totally do that. Like a really good iPhone can do that actually. And in fact, there's if you go to YouTube, there's a ton of videos where they use the iPhone to make really great movies and great shots. So it is possible. That's why, again, I wanted it to be this to be not just about how to use DSLR, but how to take good pictures. And if you take good pictures, then if you have a good eye, you'll be able to take a good picture with a phone, with a point and shoot, with a DSLR of any type, and it'll still be good with film. And but if I would say, like for you, you know, Grace, I know for you, you have a business, you use product shots. It definitely is more advantageous to be able to utilize a DSLR for that, because there are certain things that a SLR can do that an iPhone still cannot do.
Right.
So I think a lot of it depends on your use. For everyday use, it doesn't make sense to use DSLR. It's almost better to use a phone. But just use, if you have a good one or a good eye. That's the key. Do you have a good eye? If you have a good eye, you can make something look so good regardless of the quality of your equipment. It's all about your eye first, then the equipment is second. Yeah. Any other questions?
You know how when you're going to, let's say, take a sunrise picture, can you do it with your iPhone?
Yes.
Because it's about the light, right? So how would you adjust it on your phone?
Okay, so the thing about us, yeah, all right, it is possible to do it, but it will be much more difficult. So it'll be much more difficult. I think it's because taking a picture of the sun
Mm-hmm.
is perhaps one of the most challenging pictures
Yeah.
because of the amount of light that's coming straight into your sensor. So it won't look as good. And also it depends on the angle of your shot, how you're utilizing sun. Is it behind clouds? Is it, you know, so that's a factor as well. Why, do you want that shot, Susie?
Well, you know, like well, I've been to that Halalakala in Maui like twice.
Uh-huh.
And every time I want to take a photo of like sun rising, everybody's waiting for it. I'm like, okay, let's take it. And it always comes out funky. And then a few years ago, I went with my family, and my aunt is actually a good photographer. So she does have those DSLRs. And it came out perfect. And I was like, oh, but I'm not gonna go around and take, I don't know. And
Yeah.
she set them up really nicely. And
Yes.
another thing is also like Northern Lights, right? It was like once in a lifetime Northern Lights, and I had no idea that you had to set up tripod.
Yep.
And then tour guide told us, oh, you have to do it this shuttle like 18 whatever point. I forgot the thing because I only have my iPhone. And again, the cloud is moving and I'm trying to take the shot, and then the tripod, they were saying that is the key also to taking the photo of the Northern Lights.
Any type of photography at night, you need a tripod. If you're gonna, like, if your goal is, I want this to be on my wall, you know, then you're gonna need that. And yeah, you're right. Sunrise shots, very difficult with a phone. So there are certain things that truly an iPhone can do, such as when there's plenty of light, you know, things are great. But if you're trying to get specialty shots, when there's a lot of light or when there's little light, that's when the DSLR really will sort of blow away the iPhone or any type of phone. Yeah. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why that is the case. Next is, we're going to do this specifically next week. We'll talk about, like I said, Adobe Suite, Creative Suite. In particular, we'll look at Photoshop right here. We'll look at Lightroom. We will look at InDesign a little bit. We'll look at InDesign. We'll look at Illustrator. Where's Illustrator? I think this is Illustrator. And then that's Lightroom.
There's another
This is an AI Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. We've been using, Elizabeth and I have been using this one, this is Premiere, Adobe Premiere, and Adobe Audition for a lot of our video stuff that we've had to learn. And then on the bottom right is what Carissa uses, Figma. And so she'll teach that, how to use that. Figma is, again, free, so the great thing is any of you can utilize it. But that'll be next week. Okay, and then we're going to finish with talking about the settings of photography. These things, photography settings, and specifically I'm talking a lot about the stuff right here on the DSLR, you guys can see it, it's a balancing act. And the first is, if you look on your DSLR, I know this is backwards, I'm sorry, it's a mirror image, but if you look at your DSLR, there's something called A. Do you all see that? If you have a DSLR or anything like that, there's an A. That A stands for aperture. And that's what you're going to see right here. Okay? So that stands for aperture. And and aperture. Okay, I'm sorry. I have some notes, so you could see my notes. All right, we could look at this together. Aperture is the opening in your lens that lets light pass through the center. So if you actually have a DSLR, again, you don't have to have it, but if you have a DSLR, you can actually see, oh yeah, you can't see this. You can actually look in your lens side and you can actually look in and see if you have a zoom. If you're opening and closing your zoom, you can see the aperture. You can see the size of the hole. It's basically, that aperture controls the amount of light that's going into your camera. Think of it as the pupil for your lens. It dilates to let more light in and contracts to restrict light when it's bright. So aperture is probably it's what you think about especially when you're thinking about adjusting depth of field. You know that whole concept of having the background blurred and the subject clear? That's called bokeh, the bokeh effect. Well, the way that happens is through aperture. And large apertures correlate to small f-stop numbers. You see there where it says f16? The reason why it's /16 is because it is a fraction. And I know most of you are good with math. I am not. So you will understand this better than I do. Okay, so the larger the number, see f16, the smaller the hole. And the smaller the hole, the less light is coming through. That's another way to describe it is stop down, slow aperture, close down aperture. That means more depth of field. So remember the image that I showed earlier. I'll show you this one. So when there's a small, when the aperture is very small, when the lens opening is very small, you have a more depth of field. So you actually take a picture. So when you're taking a picture, let's say at Yosemite, and you're trying to get the whole valley, you're just past that tunnel, you come out and there's there's actually a stop. You get out, you're trying to take a picture where you can see El Capitan and Half Dome. You're trying to get everything in the shot. What you're actually doing is you see the large depth of field. You want to stop that down so that it's actually almost like f22 usually is the max, smallest that you could get. And the smaller the aperture, the more everything is in focus. Everything is in focus. Now, the wider the aperture, you see how at the very end, 2.8, f2.8, the wider the aperture or larger the aperture, the more light comes in. The more light comes in, it allows you to focus on the subject, and then the background is blurred. So that's where it basically narrows the depth of field. So you see this? It narrows the depth of field here, and therefore everything else becomes blurred. So if you're trying to take a portrait shot of somebody and you want the background to be blurred, you want that aperture to be as wide open as possible. And the best cameras, the best lenses will have really large, will have really, why is it doing that? Where did that come from? Anyway, we'll have really large apertures. What is this? Sorry, I don't know. Oh, there we go. I don't know why that happened. So here's the thing. They're called f-stop numbers. F means focal length. And just think of it, f-stop like a fraction. You can think of an aperture f8 as the fraction 1/8. So an aperture of f2 is equivalent to 1/2 the focal length. An aperture of f16 is 1/16 of the focal length, and so on. So basically, an aperture of f2 is large, and an aperture of f16 is small. You know, think of it like a 16th is smaller than a half, right? Because a 16th is smaller than a half, a 16th opening is smaller than a half opening. So that's when you look at then your lens. If you look at your lens, if you have a lens, if you look at it, so what this says, take a look at this. Okay, you probably can't see it because it's mirror image, sorry. But basically it's 4.5 dash 6.3, and then it says /55 to 210. Now here's what this means. The largest aperture is going to be 4.5. You could see, according to that chart, that's not the smallest it could go. You know why? This lens is not that expensive. If it was if I paid $2,000 for this lens, I could get to 2.8. But because I only paid $500 for this lens, I get to 4.5. And then so what it's saying is, if you have a lens, if you want to really understand it, it says 4.5, and then at 55 millimeters, the largest it can get is going to be 4.5, f4.5. At 210 millimeters, the largest it's going to get is 6.3. So this is a cheap lens. I know $500 doesn't sound cheap, but it's actually very cheap. There's, lenses can go to $10,000. So this is, so you have to understand, like when you're talking about aperture, a lot of it is just understanding the size of the lens. And the more light comes in, the more the depth of field, you can get a narrow depth of field. The less light comes in, broader, larger depth of field. Everybody understand? Okay, hang tight to that because that's aperture. I'm just going to explain these things and then we're going to talk about like, well, how do you put it all together? Next is shutter speed. Shutter speed is the amount of time it takes for the shutter to close, right? So if you look at this, This is very important because you know those astral shots, the star shots, as well as the streaking light shots, it's all shutter speed based. So if you look at this, 1 second, when it says 1 quotation mark, it means 1 second, half second, quarter second, eighth second. That's very slow shutter speed. So it's going 1, click, 2, click. So super slow. On the very far end is 1/1000th of a second. So it's, you know, it's super fast. So when that means that it's going, the shutter is closing at that pace, so it can capture someone running in full sprint because the shutter closes so fast that it actually is able to, the light is, it just goes for a quick second. So the faster the shutter speed, the more it can capture action. The slower the shutter speed, the more it allows for more light to come in before the shutter closes, which is why there's that look. Okay, I'll show you. These are shutter speed shots. See, if you look at that fish, you know, that's being caught, you all see that, right? The fish that's being caught. That fish is being caught because it's, the way you're able to catch that is you have to super fast shutter speed. That guy is waiting there, hoping. And photographers, nature photographers, they literally wait the whole day. And they're just waiting for something to happen. And usually they put on a super fast shutter speed. So these are all shutter speed shots. That milk drop, you just drop it, but you put fast shutter speed. So it captures it and it stops even the splatter is caught. The surfing shot, fast shutter speed. You know, because obviously that guy's moving fast, right? So what you need to do is, on top of having a fast shutter speed, you also need something called AF. If you look at your cameras, a lot of them will have something like AF and MF. AF stands for autofocus. MF stands for manual focus. So AF is what it sounds like. It's if you put your camera on a subject, it captures, the computer will capture, will focus on the movement of something. It'll do it automatically. MF is you're actually physically changing the focus. Now here's the thing is that if you are, the better the camera, the more modern the camera, the better they're able to capture actually autofocus. Because like this Sony has something like 45 points of autofocus. And so it can track someone a lot better than my old camera, my old Canon could, even though I paid a lot more for my old Canon. So it can actually track it a lot better. And in order to get that surfer guy, they needed a quick autofocus with a fast shutter speed. I mean, that's a good shot, right? The three bottom shots are all super slow shutter speeds. When I say slow, it's 30 seconds. Sometimes it's minutes. It could be an hour long. The way you get the star shot, you put it on a tripod, you put your DSLR on that tripod, you go to your shutter speed, you go all the way to the end. There's something called, a lot of times it's called bulb, meaning there's the longest you can open up a camera for is usually like 30 seconds. But if you let it go, it can go all the way to 5 minutes. And what happens is that it's staying open. So the lens is staying open like this, and all the light of the stars is coming in, and it's shifting and changing. And the camera's staying open, so it's capturing, even because the star, it's not going super fast, it's going really slow, right? It's going circular across, but it's capturing, the lens is capturing the streaks because it's still open. You know, 2 minutes go by, 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by, and then finally it clicks. And then all those lights are imprinted on the sensor and then transferred over to the shot. That's how you're able to get the northern lights, or to get let me go back to it. The car The car is possible because you do the same thing. Whoops, wrong one. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay, we're going to keep on going then. Next is ISO. ISO is basically, as I wrote, it's a camera setting that brightens or darkens a photo. Pretty simple. It used to be actually in film. Do you remember, anyone remember film? Yeah, you do, right? Do you remember the canisters? You buy the little canisters and it would be like ASA 100, 200, 400, ISO 400. Well, basically, ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. And it's actually the name of an organization. It has nothing to do with film, but because photography started using it, they just took the word ISO and just described it to utilize film sensitivity. And so basically, the lower the ISO, the less the sensitivity. You know, the higher the ISO, the more the sensitivity. So the lower the ISO, if you look at the difference is that if it's higher ISO, it allows more light to come in, but it actually leads to, there's a trade-off. With the trade-off is more noise, pixelation. You see that, right? That's called noise. And ISO 3200 has more noise, but you can take pictures in the dark. And so today, modern DSLRs, they're going up to like 100,000 ISO. I mean, it's crazy. So you can almost go into a completely dark room, take a shot, and still get something, which is pretty remarkable when there's barely any light. But what you will see is artifacting or noise. And that noise, you're always wrestling. Okay, am I okay with having this much noise or not? If you're not okay with it, then you want to turn down the ISO. Now, obviously, if you're outside in a place where there's a lot of light, turn down your ISO, because having the lowest ISO means the least noise. But having higher ISO, you're just going to get noise. So if you're on a sunny day, you want it to be the shot to be as crisp as possible. So you want to go to ISO 100, ISO 50. A lot of your cameras will have auto ISO. In other words, it will determine what the ISO is. Your camera will be. Sometimes you just want to go on auto ISO, but sometimes you don't. Because what will happen is that on an overcast day, maybe it'll switch, auto ISO will lead to, maybe it'll go to ISO 600. But maybe you're thinking, you know what, I'll adjust the other parts and I'll be able to get a really good shot even at ISO 100, because I want it to be so clear, this shot. I don't want it to look pixelated at all. Because when you print a picture, you don't want noise like this, what you see in ISO 3200, right? Or even ISO 800. You don't want that. You want like that picture to be sharp, crisp. And the keys to having a crisp picture is making sure that your noise is almost to as little, as minimal as possible, having as low ISO as possible. And another key to actually having a really crisp picture is your shutter speed again. Because when you have you're holding your camera, if you're holding your camera, right? And if I'm holding my camera, if I'm taking a picture at 1/30th of a second, so 1/30. So if you look in your camera and you say 1/30th of a second, or let's say 1/8 of a second, just by holding it with my hand, it's almost impossible to hold it completely steady, no matter how steady you are. That's why a tripod is so critical as you go, as the shutter goes slower. Because if the shutter is slow, it can sense even the smallest movement of your camera. The faster the shutter speed, then because it's clicking so quickly, it actually doesn't detect any shaking of your hand, right? But the slower the shutter speed, it's going to check. It's going to be able to feel. So sometimes when we're taking pictures with a bunch of the guys, we're doing a photography outing or something, what we will do is, if we don't have our tripod is too much of a pain to set up, but it's closer towards dusk. It's really dark, and I want a slow shutter speed because I can't get enough light. Then you just literally suck in your arms as much as possible. Breathe in, control your breathing. If you can, place your arms on some surface so that your hands will act almost like a tripod. Some people are really good at it, but that's what, so that's going to be an impact. That's going to make an impact as to whether your shot is crisp and sharp or whether it's shaky. If you have shaky shots, they're blurred, it's because your hand is not steady and you're taking it either at a slow shutter speed or you're taking it with, and if you have pixelated shots, it's because your ISO is too high. Any questions from there?
Pastor Sam?
Yes.
So when, let's say that you're taking photo of the star, like going,
Yes.
so then you would set up your camera with all those settings, and then you click on the button and you just wait for a minute and it automatically takes photo?
Yep. So remember, it's the shutter speed
Yeah.
is the amount of time it takes for the shutter speed is the amount of time it takes for the shutter to open and close, right?
So you're not,
5
you're
minutes.
just holding on to it.
No, you're not. You just
No, you're just holding and let it go.
you just let it go.
Oh, okay.
Wait. And like I said, some of those shots that are professionally taken, they can leave it open for hours. And they just go and sit there and wait. But you know what they're doing? Remember what I told you how they take their tripod?
Mm-hmm.
If they're taking that type of shot, they are literally putting weights on,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because last thing you want is anything to move that tripod when you're waiting, because it'll blur the whole picture and it'll be a mess up. So they will put weights on there. They'll do everything to make sure this thing is as solid as a rock, and they just wait. And yeah, so the shutter stays open for as long as you've told it to stay open.
Mm.
Yeah. A lot of times they won't even press the button. They'll use a trigger, because even pressing the button shakes it a little bit. So that's really only if you're truly like trying to get the best shot you can. And sometimes if you want it to hang on your wall or in a museum, you want that shot, right? To be as crisp as you can. Focal length. Focal length is basically, all right, it's the distance between the lens and the sensor. And every lens, actually I forgot, I have a pause button, right? I realize I have a pause button.
I think they may be able to see you even if you're sharing.
Oh, can you see me even if I'm sharing my screen?
Yeah.
You can? You can. Oh, here we go. Oh, I didn't know you could see me even if I'm sharing my screen. So the lens, like I said, it has a focal length, right? And this one, I'm sorry, this is backwards again. See, if you have a lens, this one it goes 210, 55, 70, 100, 135, 210. So it goes all the way from 55 millimeters to 210 millimeters. And the way that you have to look at it is, if you look at this picture that's on my screen, you'll see that at 11 meters, it's very wide. So I get the complete open shot. And then the longer it goes, the more narrow it becomes. So I think the right picture does a good job of explaining it. So a 500 millimeter lens, I'm able to, that's a telephoto lens, that actually can see very far away, but the focus is so narrow, right? A wide angle lens is going to go try to get the screen as far as possible, and then 50 is right in the middle. Now, I have here a lens, where is it? Oh, here. This is a 16 millimeter prime lens. It's a Sigma. This lens is not a zoom lens. So this is a zoom lens, and the reason it's a zoom is because it goes from 55 to 210, right? Take a look at that numbers. Whereas this one is just one number, 16 millimeter, meaning there's only one lens. And that's it, right? I mean, actually, I'm sorry, there's only one lens inside here. And it's called a prime lens because it's a single lens, and it's fixed in its distance, 16 millimeters. I can't zoom it. I can't change, I'm not gonna change the distance. Whereas this one, I actually can change the distance. There are two lenses inside here. It's like this and this, and it allows me to go back and forth. Like it switches the distance, right? A prime lens, so the positive of this is that it actually can have two different shots. It can go two different distances or multiple distances, but it has two lenses. So think of it this way: if you take a glass and another glass and stick it next to each other and look through it, it won't be as clear as just looking through one glass, and it won't be as clear as looking through zero glasses. So every time you put another glass on top of stack them on top of each other, it's not going to be as sharp as the next because it's just more refraction, right, of the light. So because the zoom lens has two lenses, it probably won't be as sharp as a single prime lens. However, there are exceptions. On top of that, if you go to the store and you see, wow, this is a $10,000 lens. The reason why is that glass is like really specially designed to be as crisp and clear. So sports photographers, professional photographers, they'll pay $4,000 for a lens. Whereas this glass, it's not going to be that great. So this is a fixed focal length. That's why it's called a fixed focal length prime lens. The great thing about it is that it's relatively cheap, but it actually takes pretty clear shots. A 50 millimeter lens, prime lens, is actually a really great lens for most cameras, and it actually takes really clear shots. They're called the Nifty 50. It's like a nickname for their really good camera. I mean, for a good lens, that's usually only around $100. So anyway, zoom lens or the focal length determines the width of the breadth of the shot, wide or narrow telephoto. Okay, let us stop there, and let me give you one last thing, and then I'm just going to quickly go over this last part and we're done. This part, aperture, shutter speed, ISO, focal length, those four, I started this out by saying it's a balancing act. And dependent on the circumstance and the context, all four are going to be weighed against each other. They all impact a shot. So if I wanted to take a picture of a flower, right? If I'm going to try to take a picture of a flower and I want really nice depth of field, color saturation, and I want that bokeh effect, then I'm going to open up that lens really wide. But if it's a really sunny day, 12 noon, then all the light is going to be so sharp. I mean, it'll be so washed out on the flower that when you take the picture, it won't look so colorful. It'll look almost white because the light is too strong. So then I might start thinking, okay, this isn't a good time to go actually take this picture. A lot of times, actually, that's the answer. Don't take the picture at 12. You might think, oh, but that's the only time I can go to the botanical garden. Well, no, find another time. Or you're going to have to come up with different ways, like maybe don't take a picture of that flower, but go where there's a tree and a shade. And now, aperture is going to be critical at that point. If you're going to take a picture at your kid's sporting event, or if you have a child and you're trying to take a picture of them, they're running around, make sure you have good shutter speed and you have good access to light. Your ISO might need to be cranked up in order for you to be able to really capture that. So all of these things are held in balance to each other. Most people, when they take pictures, if you're using a DSLR, most people set it up on the A. and use aperture priority. You control the aperture. So just to let you know, what these are is that whatever this is, it's going to determine what you're going to make the camera you set, and the camera, the computer is going to adjust to whatever your manual setting is. So if I say aperture, it means I'm going to put the aperture as, I want to control the aperture, and then I'm going to let the camera control the shutter speed. It'll adjust to whatever. So if let's say it's a light day and I want to take my kids out, I'll almost always set it to aperture priority, and I'll let the camera adjust the shutter speed. But shutter speed, sometimes I might want that to be S, and I'll use that when I'm, say, out. Let's say my kids are in a sports activity and they're running around really fast. I want to control the shutter speed. I want it to be 1/1000th of a second. And then I'll let the camera control the aperture. And then lastly, M is another most critical one. M is manual. That one you control aperture and shutter speed. You can control both. So if you have more time, you really want to be able to hold on to both and be able to utilize both. I never use auto. P is for program. That's where you can program in your own settings. There's other things right there, but generally, most people either stay with manual, shutter speed, or aperture priority. And generally, most people stay with aperture priority. So you can control, hey, I want as much light in, or I want as little light in. Little light may be on a day where it's so bright, you don't want a lot of light in. And you want your ISO down as much as possible. But on a cloudy day, maybe I want higher aperture, I want more light in. I might want to crank my ISO up to 400 maybe, or even to 800. If I'm inside, usually indoors, you crank up your ISO to 800, sometimes 1600. It depends on your camera. If your camera is really up to date and modern, it can actually do a pretty good job of bringing down the noise, even though there's a higher ISO. Any questions? So it is a balancing act, utilizing all those and testing it out, trying it out and balancing it. So if you're new to it, and for those of you who have a DSLR, try utilizing all the different spots and see what looks best. Any questions thus far? We'll go to this last part. This part is for everybody, regardless of which camera you're using. Any other last questions? Okay. I'm going to cover this super fast. How do you use your camera phone the best? Okay, so this is for everybody. 1, simplicity. Just really don't try to go crazy with it. Actually, the more you try to put into it, usually the worse the picture is. Some of the best shots are the most simple. 2nd, perspective. I went to Muir Woods with my parents, and what I did was I actually put my camera, so all these shots are with my phone, okay, just FYI. It's not with my DSLR. It's all with my phone. So I'm not saying these are the best shots in the world either, but I just want to show you what I mean by these things. So what I did was I just took my phone, put it right next to the bark, and I looked up, and I just saw, I really like this contrast of these trees and the bark. It's just what was up in the sky, but it created a half bark of one tree and then all the other trees. And that's again what I was saying is look up. Don't always and especially at a place like Muir Woods, you would be looking up all the time. But a lot of places, the best shots are looking for lines. Look for the lines. Look at perspective. What are the different perspectives? Framing. Jack's right next to me, so he's a little camera shy. Framing. In other words, find an area where, wow, it's literally like a frame. Like you can stick the subject in. Yeah, they might not always want to do it. Thankfully, I had a willing subject. But recognize that there are a lot of places where you can actually find perfect frames to things naturally without actually forcing it. The rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is, this is where I didn't take the shot with Jack straight in the middle. It wouldn't have been as interesting, actually. But I did make a mistake. I chopped off his feet. See, I was the
Amputator.
The amputator again. Lines, light, and symmetry. So just sometimes light, when you see it, when you see lines, that's when you think, oh, I want to take that shot. And I thought that was a cool line right next to the bridge, which is going horizontally, and the light, the rays are just shooting down this way. Now here's this, is that I framed this in a way because you're probably wondering, why did I cut off the sun? Well, Susie, it was your question before. The reason I cut off the sun is because actually the sun did not give it a good picture, because the iPhone does not handle the sun well. So if I actually put the sun into the picture and where you saw the sun, it would look so blurred, it would have actually ruined the picture. So that's where you have to think about, what are you trying to capture in the whole frame? There's another thing I messed up on. Anyone see it? There's a mess up in this picture. Yeah, there's people randomly on the side. I wasn't willing to wait for them to walk away. You know that? I just said, I got to take this picture. I got to go, right? If I really wanted this picture to be spot on, I would have waited for them to walk. And they're so close out of it. If you ever try to take a shot, probably tried to do that, where you try to take a picture and people are in it and they're walking away. You think, oh, I can't wait till they just walk away just a little bit more. And then someone else comes in and you're like, oh, well, things like that. So recognize that sometimes you're making adjustments. Close-ups. So I think actually the iPhone does a pretty good job with macro pictures, close-ups. And this is just moss. Went up as close up as I could. And I really like the fact that it captured the saturation of the color really well with the lines of the wood. Color eye awareness. So I was in the city on Christmas, no, was it Christmas Day? It was sometime. And we saw this picture and I thought, oh, I have 5 people. That's their cousin. And we're in the city. And I thought, oh, I think it'd be cool to take a picture with them. The thing is, Sarah and Carissa and Elizabeth got it. The other two, they're just too plain. If they had that look. But what I thought was I turned it into black and white because it just fits, because they were all in black and white, you know. But recognize wherever you're walking, there's always a picture. You can always be cool. It's just keep your eyes open, you know, look around, see what's different. And when you do that, you can see great things. You can see really interesting things. Again, symmetry and color. This is a shot I took in Spain. But it's just, I love the oldness of it, you know, and the colors. Again, symmetry and color. These are all with my phone. So these are not DSLR shots. They're all with my phone, you know, and it's on this day, just the blue. I love the blue. Like the blue just made it work because it's such a different type of blue. And with that classic building, and it's all symmetry with the blue that stand out. Well, there's more and more, and I'm sure you all have something great you can show as well. So anyway, that's it. There are so many rabbit trails, and really the best way to do this is if we could have all gone out right after and say, all right, let's go take some pictures. And I think we could, and that's when you learn. You say, oh, what are you doing there? What's your aperture at? What's your shutter speed at? And the more you talk about that, the more you get it. Any questions before we close? That's a ton of information, I know. I'll send this the link to the slides to all of you so you can take a look at it again. You'll have access to it. If you have questions about equipment or anything else, please feel free to connect with me, ask me, or yeah, anything. Any other questions? No? All good? Okay, so if you are planning on joining us for the design side, I want you to get ready to show me at least one shot that you have taken from the next time that we meet. Okay, it could be with your phone or DSLR. I want to see something that you have done to utilize at least some of the, maybe one or maybe 2 or 3 shots of something that you have taken that have actually utilized some of these principles. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was long, but I hope it really helps you to just take good pictures. If you just take some of these principles, I think you'll really see it. Like I said, I'll send you all the information. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. Okay?
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Pastor Sam.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.